Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode in the Lines That Never Were series, where we take a look at proposed but forgotten New York City subway projects. In this video, we will take a look at the Staten Island Subway. Plans to build the Staten Island Subway dates back to 1888, back before New York City had a subway system and back before New York City was unified. So this project should take the Second Avenue Subway's place for being the most infamous on being delayed. This plan was to connect the Brooklyn Railroad's, today's LIRR Bay Ridge branch, to the Staten Island Railway. Even though there were groundbreaking ceremonies and even construction, it stopped because of financial issues. When the subway opened in 1904, the IRT was interested in getting a line to Staten Island. So they proposed a direct line from Manhattan into Staten Island, either along the coastline of New Jersey or an underwater route straight from Manhattan to Staten Island, or a direct line along the coastline of western Brooklyn to Staten Island. They soon abandoned that idea once the complexities started derailing the project, as any line through New Jersey would create a bureaucratic nightmare. An underwater route would cost a lot of money, and the rights for the BMT 4th Avenue line, where the connection to Staten Island would be the most feasible, was handed to the BRT. Speaking of the BMT 4th Avenue line, in 1912, when the BMT 4th Avenue line was proposed, planners proposed extending the subway over to Staten Island, and a line was proposed to branch off of the 59th Street station and connect to St. George. This plan was changed in 1919 as an extension of the BMT 4th Avenue line, and nearly came into fruition by 1922. When the line was extended to 95th Street in 1925, it was envisioned as the first step of extending into Staten Island, as construction of the tunnel started 2 years prior. However, due to John Hyland and other municipal officials wanting to make the tunnel suitable for freight operations, the project stopped. Municipal officials did not give up. In 1929, the IND second system was proposed. There was no rail link to Staten Island, but planners wanted to build a quote-unquote vehicular tunnel from Brooklyn to Staten Island, but due to the Great Depression, the project went nowhere. By 1939, when the economy was improving, the IND released the 1939 version of the IND second system. This plan actually involved a Staten Island subway, not off of the BMT 4th Avenue line, but off of the IND South Brooklyn line. Staten Island-bound trains would branch off of the IND South Brooklyn line at Fort Hamilton Parkway, then under Fort Hamilton Parkway to around 67th Street, where it will branch off of the proposed Fort Hamilton subway. Then the line would head into Staten Island. It will separate into another two branches, one south to Tompkinsville and one northwest to St. George and Westervelt Avenue. Due to World War II, the project, along with the entire IND second system, was delayed. After the war, priority was shifted to building connections between subway systems and one-stop subway extensions, but there was still interest in building a line. In 1952, planners proposed an underwater tunnel, direct from Manhattan to Staten Island, but due to the aging subway system and the feasibility of the tunnel, the line was shelved. In the 1950s, when the Verrazano Bridge was being proposed and constructed, planners saw an opportunity to build a Staten Island subway. But Robert Moses, the man responsible for overseeing the construction of the bridge, hated public transportation. So that plea fell on deaf ears, and Moses carefully built the bridge to be too weak and steep for any train to cross. By the time the bridge opened in 1964, it was too late. Ever since, the Staten Island Subway was never seriously proposed again, though the line has been revived a few times, most recently in 2010. Just like almost every proposed line, there are provisions for the Staten Island Subway. You just have to know where to look. The BMT 4th Avenue line contains a slew of provisions. For example, after 59th Street, you will see an opening in a tunnel. This opening would have been used to construct the Staten Island Subway, as a branch off of the BMT 4th Avenue line. Between 59th Street and Bay Ridge Avenue on the R line, you will see that the R runs elevated for a couple of seconds. But take a Manhattan-bound R train, and when you get to the bridge, look out the window. You will see an additional 2 trackways on the east side. What are those? Well, after 59th Street, the BMT 4th Avenue line becomes 2 tracks, and the tracks run on the west side of the avenue. But if the line was extended into Staten Island, the BRT wanted some sort of express service. So this portion was designed so that the line can easily be expanded into 4 tracks. In fact, that is the reason why at Bay Ridge Avenue and 77th Street, the southbound platforms have columns while the north side does not. And the northbound platforms are somewhat wider. This is because the northbound platforms are designed to be easily demolished to have tracks installed, and the northbound platform would have been moved east. At 86th Street and 95th Street on the R line, the stations are island platforms, but there are provisions to add another island platform beside it, making those 2 stations express for Staten Island trains. Also at 95th Street, you'll see walls at the south side of the station. But those are false walls, and would have been knocked down in order to be extended into Staten Island. Now we will head to the I&D Culver line. Before Bergen Street on the F line, you will see 2 tracks turn into 4. The inner tracks then slope downwards and at Bergen Street are nowhere to be seen. These 2 tracks are in fact under these platforms, and have their own platforms at the station. The tracks then rise up at Carroll Street, and are at level with Smith and 9th Street and the 4th Avenue 9th Street station. At 7th Avenue, trains using those tracks can stop here. But at 15th Street and Fort Hamilton Parkway, those tracks are nowhere to be seen, before re-emerging at Church Avenue. So what are these tracks used for? Well, currently the F Express, but back in 1939, planners realized the Culver line, or today's F and G trains, have too much excess capacity, as Culver Express service is unpopular. So they decided to use those tracks for a new Fort Hamilton Parkway and Staten Island Subway. The line would have branched off at Fort Hamilton Parkway. You can't see it, as it is below where I am at, but the tracks would have diverged somewhere here. In Staten Island, we will take a look at its longest road, Highland Boulevard. But there are no rail provisions here for Staten Island. But the name had to do with the Staten Island Subway. In the 1920s, John Highland, the mayor at the time, promised a Staten Island Subway. Staten Islanders, in return, named the longest road in the island after him, hence the name Highland Boulevard. Even though the subway never happened, the name still stayed. On the eastern side of Staten Island, you'll see a line of houses that don't seem to be in line with the street grid. Then at McLean Avenue, a certain portion of the road is lighter than the others. Next, at Robin Road, you'll see a bridge in the middle of nowhere. Finally, you'll see a wide grass plot when coming off of the Verrazano Bridge. What do those oddities have to do with the Staten Island Subway? Well, these are traces of the defunct South Beach branch of the Staten Island Railway. The bridge at Robin Road carried trains for the branch, while the lighter section at McLean Avenue used to be a road bridge, with trains running underneath it. The line of houses that contradict the street grid is the right-of-way where the trains used to run on. Lastly, the grass plot off of the Verrazano's Narrows Bridge was where the line would have run. In fact, it was built there just in case the South Beach branch was to be reactivated. The South Beach branch relates to the proposed Staten Island Subway, as the subway would use portions of the branch. It was proposed that from Fort Wadsworth Station to Wentworth Avenue, Trains from the BMT 4th Avenue line would run there. Bonus, at St. John's Avenue and Clayton Street, you will see a slab of blocks with 1936 engraved in it. That is also a trace of the South Beach branch. Furthermore, at Chestnut Avenue and Anderson Avenue, there is a ramp. That also belongs to the South Beach branch as a pedestrian overpass over the South Beach branch. These two portions were not part of the Staten Island Subway plans. Well, this is interesting. I am currently on the fence on whether we should revive the plans, as on the one hand, 400,000 Staten Island residents have no way of getting on the subway. I mean, they have the Staten Island Railway, but with those frequencies, they might as well run bus service to replace it. They also have an express bus system and the ferry, but the express bus and the ferry are too slow. The MTA has done something with the express bus network, but it seems insufficient. If some sort of subway expansion to the island is done, it would be a huge boon to everyone on the island. But there are so many other subway projects that the MTA could do, like, CBTC de-interlining 2nd Avenue, Utica Avenue's Queenslink 7 train project, rebuilding the Jamaica line, conversion of the LIRR and Metro North into regional rail system, and more. And the Staten Island Subway feels like the last priority on the list. The MTA is currently in a lot of debt, around $25 billion, so they are not in the state to build any new lines. If the city starts taking up expansion projects, which they should, then I lean towards including a Staten Island Subway. There are many options, but 3 are on my mind. The first is an underwater subway line direct from St. George to South Ferry. This option will involve 5 to 7 miles of tunneling under New York Harbor and would cost the most, at around $11.5 billion if using 2nd Avenue subway costs. Even though that would be the most expensive option, it would be the most beneficial. Trains can now run into Staten Island, and it would take 8 minutes to get from South Ferry to St. George. That is way better than a 25 to 30 minute ferry ride. But wait, we are not done here. If we can connect the Staten Island Railway and beef up all the stations to what you would find at a typical subway station and have trains running every 2 to 5 minutes, then that would be a major upgrade from the 20 to 30 minute wait times. There will be problems with it, like converting the railway from railroad to subway status, the fact that any subway line that takes this line over would contain the longest local-only service and more, and would cost something in the billions range, so this should be pursued with caution. The only downside is that Staten Island commuters who want to get into Brooklyn cannot without backtracking. So this project is not ideal, as if you're spending billions, you should give more options. Luckily, the next option does just that. My next option would involve the F and G trains, and starts at Carroll Street. Using the 2 inner tracks, we would divert those tracks off of the Culver line and make it run in a tunnel via 3rd Avenue, or maybe delete the aging BQE and replace it with a quieter elevated train. There will be a station at 59th Street before going underground into a tunnel to St. George. There will be around 2.5 miles of tunnel and 3 miles of elevated segments, and should cost around $8 to $12 billion. Travel times would be around 15 to 20 minutes from St. George to East Broadway, the first stop in Manhattan. However, even though this does provide a Brooklyn connection, it does create another branch. So what trains will run on the new line? Well, there are 2 options, both involving fully de-interlining the F and G. The first option is to divert F trains on the new line, and to run G trains all the way to Coney Island. This would cost the least amount, but I do suggest reopening the Bergen Street lower level, so that commuters can transfer between the F and G trains. If the G is fully separated from the F, we can run peak Culver Express trains from Smith and 9th Streets to Kings Highway. But Culver riders would obviously complain about the one-seat ride issues. The second option is to send the G to Staten Island and to keep the F the way it is. This would necessitate more construction, as the G does not have access to the Culver Express tracks at Bergen Street, but is doable provided that you shift Bergen Street further south 800 feet and shut down the street above for some time. Personally, I like the first option better, as South Brooklyn is served by the Brighton Line, the West End Line, and the Sea Beach Line. All lines have Manhattan-bound service. So what is this one line not having Manhattan service going to do? Besides, you'll get your transfer at Bergen Street, and with a little bit of de-interlining at DeKalb Junction, you can support more riders. In fact, I am giving South Brooklyn riders more choices and better service, because giving the F and G their own tracks allows G service to be buffed to frequencies every 2 to 3 minutes, and will give South Brooklyn riders faster service to Williamsburg and Queens. Anyway, feel free to disagree with me in the comments section. I would love to hear your thoughts. The final option is a simple one-stop extension on the R from 95th Street to Grasmere Station on the Staten Island Railway. This would cost the least, at around 3.29 miles of new tunnels, and would cost $6 to $7 billion. But travel times from South Ferry to Grasmere Station would be 36 minutes on the R. But if you de-interline DeKalb Junction using Van Schnookenrekken and Uday Schultz plan, and send the B down to Staten Island, it would only be 33 minutes from Staten Island to Grand Street, the first station in Manhattan. Currently, it takes an express bus 50 minutes to get to Grand Street from Grasmere Station. For the F and R train options, getting to Staten Island is one thing, but we should extend the line further into Staten Island. Options include a line via the Staten Island Expressway, a Castleton Avenue line, a Forest Avenue line, or a Victory Boulevard line. I personally prefer a Castleton Avenue or a Forest Avenue line, as those two lines run near or at the northern section of the borough, a dense residential area. In fact, of the top 5 Staten Island bus routes, 4 of them run in the North Shore. So it is logical that any proposed subway line should go to the northern section of Staten Island in order to serve the most riders. Combined with beefed up Staten Island Railway service, this should serve Staten Island well enough for the foreseeable future. In short, should this be at the top priority for the subway? Probably not. But should it be done by 2050? Absolutely. The Staten Island Subway should happen. And although you can say the NIMBYs on the island don't like it, a new generation is opening to the idea that the subway should happen. Anyway, that marks the end of this video. What are your thoughts on the Staten Island Subway? Let us know in the comments below. And have a good day. Because making commuters transfer onto a ferry capped development potential. Even though there were groundbreaking ceremonies and even construction, it stopped because of financial issues. Finally, you'll see a wide grass plot when coming off of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. What do those oddities have to do with the Staten Island Subway? Well, these are traces of the defunct South Beach branch of the Staten Island Railway.